I used to be an engineer, and I remember it was like a Monday or Tuesday. I was still like maybe my second or third year in, and I was starting to lose my excitement for it. And I was learning to fly planes at the time. One of the jobs, we had to go to Warrnambool from Essendon. And so the guy, he said, we'll just charter a plane. It would go like, yes, that's my favorite thing. Maybe I'll get to fly the plane because I'm doing my license. Maybe the pilot will allow me. So then I wake up in the morning. I'm like 2 hours earlier, just woken up 2 hours earlier to get on the train to get there on time. And then the train was delayed. The train was delayed by 2 hours. So finally, when I got there, the guy had to go and I missed it. And so that Friday, I said, okay, on Monday, I'm going to quit. I'm done. I'm done with this place. On Monday, I'm going to come in, I'm going to quit. On the Friday before that Monday, I was made redundant. It was the best thing. I got a huge payout and I just went traveling. And then that's when I had to build my online business. And from there was essentially where I changed my entire lifestyle. Like I never want to work in an office for someone ever again.
That to me, that's just really classic, because I know so many people who have just gone, I'm done here, drop everything and no sort of preparation, and then they just jump straight into it. And I have to say, I think that for a lot of people, doing it that way forces you to succeed because you don't have any options. The other option is to go back and get another job. Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm your host, Trudy Rankin. And today I have somebody with me who's been on the podcast before, but recently I've been through an experience and I wanted to bring him back on just to give you some tips so that you can avoid some of the things that I got a little bit wrong when I did this experience that I'll explain to you in a sec. But we've got with us Nick Abregu, who is, I know him as being the founder of Gorilla Co., but he also has a business that's called The Website Builders. He's the founder of that. So I'll just explain what I was talking about earlier. I have a website that I created myself a very long time ago on the Wix platform. And it finally got to the place where I desperately needed it to be on WordPress. And I've said this before, I am not a good website developer. I'm not a good landing page developer. And I decided it was just the better part of valor for me to reach out to somebody and get them to help me by creating a new website based on what I'd had before, plus some changes that had come along over the years. And so we went through this process where I pulled together a little bit of information. It's just some of my thoughts that I had about what I wanted. And I had some discussions and talked with Nick about it and stuff like that. And then we went into the build process, went back and forth and back and forth. And I realized that I had not put together anywhere near as much information as I needed to. And I could have made his team's life a lot easier if I had pulled this information together. And so I decided that it would be really sensible. It might be something that you as listeners might find really useful, because if you're thinking about outsourcing the creation of a website or getting your website rebuilt, having a framework that you can use to just prepare and get ready for and share with the people who are going to rebuild your website or build a new website, it's just going to make the process go a whole lot more smoothly. And so that's why I've asked Nick to come back on the show and talk to us about what that process is. So Nick, thank you very much for being on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. I just accidentally logged myself out as you were talking. So technical difficulties.
That's okay. That's okay. We can always work our way around that.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. That's a very nice introduction. But I have to say, the one thing that you do very well is you're extremely photogenic in your photos. So you've got that. So you might not be, as you admittedly said, you might not be a good developer, but you're definitely photogenic. So congratulations on that one.
Thank you. That makes me feel a little bit better anyway.
Actually, the first thing that I start off with, and this should be the first question, is if you've designed your own website or you update your own website, it's important to discuss with the developer. Some people might think, for example, you like to develop on Divi, other people like Elementor, but for some people, there's no difference. They don't know that they're developing on that or that or that or that. So for us, this is something that I learned, is that has to be the very first question we ask is, are you used to developing or are you used to updating your website on a certain type of framework? And then from there, the whole conversation opens up.
It's one of those things because it's not something you tend to think about. I had recently, I talked about this on one of the podcast episodes. So I had actually reached out to somebody on Fiverr and got some help with a landing page, and I forgot to tell them that I needed it to be in Divi. And it's just like when you find out that they don't use Divi or they don't know how to use Divi, then that sort of brings things to a screeching halt. So it's really an important thing to discuss right up front. And if you're not familiar with using an editor theme for a WordPress website, then you can ask for recommendations and things like that. But just being able to be quite clear about what your expectations are and what you need going forward once the website's developed is really, really important. And it's easy to miss that as a question. So Nick, what I'd like you to do, if you would please, would be just to go ahead and share your process that you use to help onboard customers who need to have a website built or rebuilt, or perhaps even just landing pages. What are the things that it's helpful for them to think about so that you as a team know what they need and what to expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to break this up into what stage is the person into, what stage are they at when they're looking for advice? So one of them is going to be that they're starting from scratch, right? They've had an idea, they bought a URL or a domain name, and now they need some website built or some kind of presence. So that's one phase. Another one is that they've got a website, it's been functional, they've been using it, but they need to revamp it and they need to bring it up to a more of a modern design. And I guess the third one is that you are essentially an expert and you don't have time to tweak it. So you come to us because we've got time. So I guess whether you're starting from scratch or whether you're revamping your website, the flow is going to be exactly the same, because although we can take information from people that already have the website, it doesn't necessarily mean that's going to bring forward all the information that they have. That might not be as modern as they need to be able to convert someone. So I'll take you through the process of what we do for our onboarding questions, just to get an idea. So you start that process thinking. So the first thing that I ask people is, what's the main function of your website? What is it that you want to happen on your website? So what's the end goal? So that can be anything, because websites, it's a huge platform, right? Like we have so many different things that we can do. Some can be e-commerce, some can be like, for example, do you want your customers to make a purchase on your website? Do you want them just to be informed? Do you want them to, what kind of action do you want them to take? Like we have to look at the flow, essentially the critical client flow, as David Jennings would say. So that's important because we want to know from someone that doesn't know you at all to them becoming a client, what does that look like in between? And we want to take them through that kind of that process.
In terms of somebody who's sitting down and thinking about this as a process, you can think about it as being a customer journey, or if you're looking at it, you need to look at it from two perspectives. One is, what does the customer need from you? How are you helping your customer? And how does your website help them get to that? And so if somebody hasn't sat down and thought about that, then what would be a couple of questions that they might tuck in the back of their mind to help them just explain a little bit more fully to the team the job that they want their website to do?
Yeah, so the best way to answer that question would be, let's put yourself in the shoes of your potential client or your potential customer. But now you are the customer, right? So you're browsing, you're looking at other websites. What's the thing that is missing in all the other websites? Or what's that thing that really answers your question? Can we identify it first of all? And if not, what would the best flow for you to become their customer? What would that be? Right? And it's a little bit difficult in this situation because there's so many different websites that we can build, right? With so many different key points and elements and things like that. But that's the question that you should be asking yourself is, what do I want? If I was my customer, what would I like to take from this website that would make it an easy flow from the first time that I land on the website until the point where I've bought or I'm talking to someone or something like that? So I guess we need to keep that in mind. I think that's probably the biggest question that we have to keep in the back of our minds, because that's going to create the entire structure of the website. The other question that flows onto this is, are we educating people? Is that part of your sales flow? Are people more likely to purchase from you if they have learned about your product? Or are the people who are visiting your website, are they people that have already researched the internet? Maybe they've been to some webinar, or maybe they've Googled things just to get the best price? What stage of the sales flow is the customer at when they're visiting your website? The important aspect of it, because it'll tell us the information that we need to relay and how we need to relay it to the customer. For example, I'll give you an example. If you ever look on, say, Amazon or eBay or things like that, anytime you see information that's being pushed to you in order for you to purchase, it's always in little blocks. It's never long-winded writing. The reason for that is because the way that we like to read, if we have to read a small block here, our eyes only need to focus here, and that's it. There's not much moving. If we have text all along, our eye has to go from here to here to here to here to here to here. So it's more information that we have to process, and there's more hurdles to understand that, as opposed to just being one dot point or block of text. So that's an important point of view, because we have to understand, how does your customer learn from you? And what's the most efficient way for your customer to learn if the learning process is part of your sales tactic? For example, another case might be if you're selling, let's just say, some kind of supplement, okay? Perhaps what your customer wants, perhaps your customer, they've learned so much on the internet already that what they want to know is information that no one else has. In which case, you might want to add a white paper, or you might want to add a case study that's extremely long and detailed. That might be the best way to sell. Whereas opposed, if you just had vitamin D is essential because of this, that might not be enough, because that's common knowledge. So keep that in mind when you start this process. How does a potential customer become a paying customer? And if we can work that out, I think that's the crux of the entire website, which leads to the other point, is who are your website visitors? This might be something you can chime in on. This is your expertise, Trudy.
Yeah, so that's pretty critical. And the thing is that for a lot of people who are either getting ready to revamp their website or they're building a website for the first time, they might not actually know the answer to that question. They might not know who the potential website visitors are. And you can have a little bit of a guess because you've developed a product or a service that you're wanting to sell. But if you haven't been doing it for very long, then it's a bit of a hit and miss as to whether you've actually nailed your audience. And yeah, there's lots of things you can do to help you figure that out. But in terms of getting another crowd to help you build that website and answer that question, do you have questions that you specifically ask people to help them figure that out?
Yes. So one of the ways is, so let's take the case that the client doesn't know who they are. Okay. So we have to figure this out. It might be a case of, okay, let's look at other aspects of the business, right? Do you have any kind of social media? Let's just say you've got Facebook. Good, right? We can see the people that have interacted. We can look at the insights on the back end of Facebook, and we can start to see, even if it's things like gender, like is it male or female? Is it men? Sorry, is it age groups, say between, say, 20 to 25? Is it 30 to 40? What's the age group? And then we can start to break down, what are the interests? Okay. One of the things that I did from a very early on in my business career was, and this was when Facebook was still pretty primitive, was audience insights. So what I'll do, if I had, say, 1,000 people on my page that liked my product, I would go and I would open up in a new tab, say the first, or just any random number of 20 people. And then I would go and I'd look at their interests and pages that they've liked, and I just note them down, and just in an Excel sheet, one by one. And then you start to see what similarities these 20 random people have. Then I would create some ads or create something based on those topics that were the common denominator between all of them. And that was a pretty good way of understanding who the customer was. It wasn't always a perfect science, but if you've got nothing else, that might be the best way to go about it. The other thing is, you can ask your friends, you can ask your family, and see who is genuinely interested in what you have. For example, your family, they might be like, yeah, oh yeah, that's good. Good job. Well done, Nick. But that's it. That's the end of the conversation. Other people will ask you a week later, like, how's it going? Have you found this? Or they might send you articles. So what are they interested in? Because they've genuinely taken interest in what you do. What's their age group? Are they married? Are they single? Do they have kids? What's their status? So now we can start to build some kind of avatar of who your potential customer is. And although that might seem silly, it's definitely a free and cheap way to get it done. The other thing is that I suggest, if you have some ad spend money, what people can do, and I know we're getting really away from websites, but this is really critical in finding out who your customer is. You can launch an ad on, say, Google or Facebook and leave the parameters open. So don't close it in with anything, right? Unless it's specific to, say, only males buy this product or only females, but keep it as broad as you can. And then just grab the analytics. See who could potentially be someone that purchases your product. And then just start looking at the analytics and see what are the common denominators between all of these people.
So I have a quick question for you, because one of the things that I've discovered, to my surprise, is that I have a different group of people who come to my website, and it's completely different set of demographics to people who come to my YouTube channel. And theoretically, they should have been aligned, but they're not. So how do you actually take that kind of a piece of information and use it to help shape how the website is created, or what the person who wants the website created has to think about in order to make sure that they are targeting their website at the right people?
That's a really good component that you've brought up, because that tells me that if you are going to put efforts into your marketing, into YouTube, right, wherever you send those people is going to be extremely different to where you're doing, say, Facebook marketing, right? So you don't have to be stuck with, say, a 5-page website, right? You can build more inner pages, right, that are specific to a message. And these things are called, for those that don't know, this is called a landing page. And we build hundreds of these just to run a marketing campaign. I don't have an example that I can show you, but I can give you one example. There was the source company that we have, right? We did a marketing campaign that we sent people to a specific landing page that were targeted to men that were interested in like the mechanics of an Argentinian barbecue, right? So yeah, there's hundreds of different barbecues that you can have, but in this case, it was specific to the Argentinian barbecue. Like, you can wind it up and it gets away from the charcoals and then comes, all these things, right? All the manly barbecue things that makes them proud of themselves. But I would not have sent females who are interested in, say, using the sauce to make a delicious salads or something like that, because there's a disconnect in the congruency. It means that these landing pages, they speak directly to the customer that we've identified, but we can't do that unless we identify these people. So if you go a few steps back, who are they? What are they interested in? Good. We build that campaign, and then we build this page specifically to that person. And sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you need to change the title. Sometimes you need to change the colors. Sometimes you need to change the platform that you're sending people from. So it's a whole game of really trial and error. And not even I could tell you this will definitely work in this sequence, because you just don't know, because humans, we're just so intricate and we change our minds and we like things and we don't. But keep trying different things, and always keep an open mind on who is interested in your product, because it could change over time. The more that you evolve as a business owner, maybe your product's slowly evolving and you're not even noticing, or maybe your clientele is evolving and you don't know.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So let's assume that we're going through this process of getting somebody to create a website for us, and we're pulling our thoughts together. We've sat down, we've thought about what job we want the website to do. We've sat down, we thought about who we want to attract to the website. And then basically, what would be the next thing to think about and consider?
Okay, so the next question was, what information do we want to relate to the customers? So we've broached that rather. Get an understanding of what sells your product. Okay, what's that key point of difference, or your unique selling proposition? So what is that, and can we exploit that? Can we manipulate that in order to convey the message to your clientele so that it's clear and concise, and it prompts them to take the action that you want? So going back to, what's the functionality of your website, or what do you want your visitors to do on your website? We want them to click this button and take this action, right? So does your unique selling proposition do that? Has it done that? If not, are we getting closer, or are we spooking them off? because ultimately it's the sales funnel that we're trying to create on every single page, right? So if we didn't close them on the header with a call to action there, then what other bit of information can we give them with another call to action? So we're trying to close them, so to speak, every single point as we go down. And the further we go down, the more of the problem they have that we have to solve. So the next thing that I would ask is, let's talk about colors, because colors are really important, right? I can't remember the name of it, but it's the color wheel that tells us the emotions that are connected to each color. And it's very embarrassing that I don't remember the name.
I think it's actually called the emotion color wheel. I think it's something like that.
Perfect. So we want to start looking at that, right? We want to start looking at building that out. What's your primary color? What's the main color that we're going to use? What are the two secondary colors? And then what are the filler colors that we're going to add in? So the way that we usually do it is we start off by building out the homepage. And that tells us like structure of content. It tells us the color scheme that we're going to use, like all the color palettes. And what colors are the call to actions going to be, right? Does blue work better than red? Is yellow better than brown? So that's the things that we have to work out. But more importantly, so for anyone that's listening to this and you're contemplating building a website, is you have to love it, but more importantly, it has to convert your customers. If it comes down to the point where it converts your customers, but you don't love it, your preference is secondary, because we want to convert customers. Because if you build a website for the sole purpose of conversion, whether that's making money or getting a phone call or whatever, that has to be the most important aspect of your entire website. And our job as developers is to find the middle ground, right? We're going to be focused on the sale and you're going to be focused on what you love. So we have to find somewhere that meets both of you. That's a really important question to ask yourself when you're trying to build your website, is go and have a look at other websites and ask yourself while you're browsing, why did I click this button? What made me purchase from here? What made me browse? What made me stay on this website for 10 minutes as opposed to 2 minutes from another website? Because the more that you start educating yourself on how you browse websites, the easier it's going to be to understand why you're doing those things and why your customers are going to purchase from you.
It's a really important part, and it's one of the steps that I had to rush off and do kind of mid-journey, because I tend to just not pay so much attention to other people's websites. I do have some favorites that when I look at them, I think, wow, I really like those. But being able to have a list of websites that I think really do a good job of informing people, getting them to click buttons, they look professional, all those sorts of things. That was a useful thing to do, because as you go through that process yourself of finding those websites, not only does it help inform the team kinds of the things that you like and what you're looking for, but it also made me think in terms of, why did I actually do that, and how can I make sure that's replicated on my website? And just coming back to the colors thing as well, most people, if you're having your website rebuilt, you probably already have got a brand guideline, something that you can share with the team that tells them all about the vibe of the website and the colors and the fonts and all those sorts of things. But if you don't have something like that, what kinds of things would you be asking people to help understand? Probably comes back to your original questions around that vibe, but vibe is a very specific type of a feeling that you get when you come to a website that might not necessarily be covered by the original questions that we covered. What would you ask people to figure that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. The vibe is really important. It has to be going back to finding who your competitors are. So there's a question down here that we get to, and that's, what are the websites that you like? So I try and get at least 5 websites that they like. What do you like about them? And then I ask them to show me the competitors and rank them in which one they think is the closest competitor to them, right? And then we go on and we ask, why is it such a close competitor to you? And then they'll start telling me, because they do a similar product, or they seem to attract more people because of the way the website looks. That's very common. That's a very common answer that we get. Going back to the vibe, the thing that I ask people to do is Google your keywords, right? What are the keywords that someone's going to type into Google to find your business. Choose out of say the top 4 or 5 ads on Google that are shown, choose the top 2 or 3, and then choose the top 2 or 3 organic searches, right? Open them up and then analyze them. What do you like about them? Like, how do they make you feel? If your product is one where it's an emotional purchase rather than a logical purchase, why is this website ranked number 1? Why is that more logical to purchase than purchase number 2? What is it? Like, why are they getting such good results? And same thing with the other one. Like, what's the feeling that it gives you when you open it up? Is it slow, first of all, right? If it's slow, are you prepared to wait? Have they built a big enough brand that you're prepared to wait for the load time? Or have you jumped out because you don't really care enough? So what are these things? And then we start to figure out, I guess that brings us back to the vibe question, which is, what does your product do for people, right? For example, I'll give you one example that we took on was a funeral company, which is, it's a very emotional purchase, but it's logical, right? When someone's going through that, it's something that has to be done. It's logical, but it's mixed in with an emotional standpoint. So how do you merge the two? That's a very difficult thing to do. And how do you stand out from the crowd? I'll give you this case because it's quite easy to understand. If you look at the top 5 funeral companies, right, each of those are telling you the exact same thing. We've been around the longest, right? We care about you and we take pride in our work. You have to differentiate yourself. If I was someone looking for a funeral company, I'd be like, they're not telling me anything. So we flipped that around, and the message that we put out was, we understand what you're going through, right? So now we're looking at the logical part, right? This is the next step you need to take from where you are now. That was pretty much it. That was the whole thing. So we got a massive click-through rate for that because we weren't telling them who we are. We were saying what you should be doing next. Let us take care of you right now, right? So that you don't have to think and do this. So that took them to a landing page. So the congruency that we spoke about before, right? You don't necessarily need a whole website. The landing page works enough, but it was a congruent message. The message was, you're here now. We understand you're going through a lot. This is a very difficult time, right? These are the things that you need to focus on now in order to get this process over and done with, or in much nicer words. So did we create the vibe that these people are looking for? Did we create the vibe that we're here to hold you? Like, we're going to walk you through this process. We're not going to leave you alone. We're not going to sell you something. We're just going to tell you information that you need to know in order for you to make a decision whether or not you go with us or not. If you come 2 pages in and now you decided that we're not for you, all good. Please, by all means, we weren't for you. That's fine. I'm sorry for your loss. But other than that, we informed them, and we just kept informing them, and then put them through a messaging sequence, putting through an email sequence, and just to give them all the information. And right at the end, we're like, come in, we'll talk to you, and we'll plan this out with you. And so I think we created the vibe. I think we created enough vibe, a somber vibe, but I think we created one that made them feel cared for and made them feel as if we were just giving them a big hug and saying, it's okay, we've got you.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because one of the things that I've always found just a little bit hard to do potentially is that my brain works from a technical perspective. Features, my stuff does all these things. And the advice is, don't talk about features, talk about benefits. But I don't even think that's right. I think it's more about the vibe. It's how do you make people feel when they come to your website? How do they feel when they're looking to see whether or not you can help them? And I think that's the crux of a really effective website. I think, but it takes skill to be able to get that. And which is one of the reasons why I certainly reached out to have somebody give me a hand with developing my website, because it's something it takes a little bit of a special touch to be able to do that really well.
You know what I think it is? And I'm a victim of this myself. I also want to say, we do all this. Look at the benefits. Look, how can you not want to take it? It's all these good. But what a website that I saw once that did really was, instead of dumping all the information on me, so I'm just going to draw it here, right? The website comes up. That's the page that you land on. there was nothing but a one sentence. There was just, it's one sentence. It was probably about maybe 2 lines, one sentence, and then a line. And then the line zigzagged down like that, all the way down. And at each point was another little phrase. And each of the way down, it was instructing my brain to be informed to eventually purchase from them. And it was 1 page. And I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure I bought from them. But it was essentially just manipulating my brain to say, to only give me the information that I needed to satisfy my brain to say, yep, I'm good, let's purchase. Whereas if I had to go and search for all that stuff on someone's website, it might be too much information. And then I get information overload. This brings me back, and I know, sorry, I'm going off the rails here, but this reminds me of when I was in year 12 and I did physics. The book that we had, as opposed to every other school, and the teacher selected this book on purpose, was that thick. It was like, that's it. It was probably like 50 pages. And it was only the information that we needed that was in the curriculum. Everyone else from other schools had one of those thick books with information overload. I believe that we did one of the best in the region in physics because of that, because we only had the information we needed.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because I can remember reading a big, thick, fat physics books, and it's information overwhelm. Yeah, that's really important. I think that's a really important factor. Probably there's other things to consider and things to think about. I just got a couple more questions before we wrap up. But when somebody's thinking about having their website built, some people want to create their own copy, and some people prefer to have help. If somebody wants either way, what kind of questions do you ask in order to get people to decide whether they want help with the copy or whether or not they're going to do it themselves?
Yeah. So one of the deciding factors is are we revamping your website? Is the content already there, or are we starting from scratch? Either way, what I tell people is you don't have to be a master at copywriting. Okay. What I want from you is dot points. Just give me dot points, right, of the most important information that you want to relay to your customers. And from there, we can put in the filler words, right? We can do that for you, because filler words is not as important as the main point, right? So if you look at it, if you read a book, the first line is important, the last line is important, or say the first paragraph is important, the last paragraph is important. Everything between is just filler, right? Because you're summarizing the points. So just summarize what the key features are. And I think we have a question here is, or essentially, what's the information we want to relay to your customers? What's the most important information that we want to relay? What's your unique selling proposition? Make sure you've got that, and make sure you really understand what it is. I don't want to hear an elevator pitch, because elevator pitches sound so terrible to me. But give me that one sentence that solves my problem if you understand what my problem is. So that is essentially the bit of advice I can give on copywriting, is solve my problem in the least amount of words possible, right? We'll do the filler words later.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does make a lot of sense, because that's another thing that people tend to discuss. Should you have short website pages? Should you have long website pages? And it comes back to people's personalities. Do you tell people just enough to get them to go yes? Or do you cater for the people who need to know every single last little detail about what it is they're thinking about buying, so that they've got it? So do you tend to advise for websites that are like one homepage that's got everything in it, plus the privacy policy page and the terms of use page, or do you recommend more pages than that and split some of it out?
Yeah, the more you can niche down on your product, the better it is. So this goes back to the way you introduced me. Was you knew me as Nick from Gorilla Co, and now you know me as well as Nick, the website builders. We are the same company, right? Essentially, you get billed by the same company. But what we did is we took the website building component from Gorilla Co, which is the digital agency, and we made it its own standalone company, so that people see when they come to our website, they see that that's all we do. So really, we can get away with a one-page website. That's not, I don't think anyone would complain if we didn't have more pages, right? Because we give you all the information you need on that homepage. So that question is a little bit difficult to answer, because it depends on how many services you have. But if we can break down each individual service or each individual thing that you sell, each unique selling proposition, even we can split that up, the better. The more we can do that, the better. But sometimes you need filler. Like, it's a little bit difficult. Just I guess we have to figure out what the vibe is. If people want to read a lot, then we have to give them a lot of quality information. But whatever you do has to be quality information that you're relaying to your customers. If I can just jump onto the next point, is your social media, right? Do we add that onto your website? So something that we do is, if your product is a visual product, then we automate your Instagram onto your homepage so that people can start already interlinking. So I don't think it's enough anymore just to have your YouTube or your Facebook icons. If we can show them directly on your website what it is that you do, that's even better, because now we're doing social proof. They get to see interaction from your customers. They get to see how you reply to customers, which I think is important. If something goes bad, do you get angry at your customers, or do you try and solve the problem? What is it that you do? And so social proof is really important. And one of the customers that we had today, this morning actually, I didn't realize he had his TikTok account. He's got, I think, like 15 or 20 videos, and majority of them have about 1.7 million views. And I said to him, like, we're trying to build this authority. We're trying to build this avatar of you that says you are the best at what you do. But this is exactly what we need. In an attention economy, right? You have got people's attention. And that's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to get eyes on us. So we're definitely going to put that TikTok. I'm not sure how we're going to design it. It has to be seamless with the design, but that's definitely something we put somewhere to show that people actually do love what we do. So the customer that's looking, you're not the only person that loves what we do. Like, we have 1.7 million people that love what we do as well. Join the club.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I think it's a really valid point. Really valid point. Nick, I just wanted to just check with you just before we wrap up. Is there any one specific piece of advice that you would give to someone who is looking to outsource the building of their website or revamping of their website that we haven't already covered? What would be another key thing, the last key thing?
Yeah, vet the company. Make sure that the website company that you're going to be working with, don't just look at the price, because I've seen prices like $300. Like, we ran a $500 campaign at the beginning as well, which was bleeding us dry because we weren't doing templated things. But don't look so much at the price, but look at the reviews. Look if they got modern designs. And one of the giveaways, like one of the biggest red flags that you can find in a company, is the fonts that they use. Are they modern, or do they look outdated? If the company pays attention to the fonts, and I tell my team every Monday morning meeting that we have, it's these are new fonts, because fonts really attract, because you're reading it, but you're also getting stimulated visually. And that's important, because what you're doing is, when you're reading that font, you are associating that with bigger brands. You're making the connection with, let's just say, Coca-Cola's new campaign is using this font. You don't know that you're doing that, right? But you're just doing that innately, right? You're connecting this brand with billion-dollar companies, right? If billion-dollar companies all of a sudden went back to fonts from 2010, right? That's the trend. Follow the trend. But fonts are really important. So keep an eye out on that. Also, if I had to give only one piece of advice, it's make sure that you own the domain name, right? Don't let another company buy the domain name for you. Go to Venture IP, whatever, any place that you might want to drop an affiliate link somewhere here if you want, but make sure you pay for the domain name and you pay for the hosting. That's really important, because no one can take ownership of your website once it's built, as opposed to someone that owns the domain URL. They own your entire website. You are completely screwed if things go sour.
And that is a really valid point, because I've got a client that I'm working with who have got their website hosted on a platform that I shall not name. And when we went to try and implement some of the really important analytics setups and things like that, because it's all hosted on their proprietary way of building websites, we couldn't do it. And so now we're having to ship them off of that and onto a completely different platform. And it's just an unnecessary expense that they didn't need to have gone through if they had known to do exactly what you said: own your website, own the hosting, don't put it on somebody else's platform. Yeah, that's really important. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast to talk about all the things that people need to talk about or to think about in order to have somebody else help them with their website, either a website built from scratch or a revamp or whatever. And it just helps, like I said, it helps both sides. You get clarity, and it helps the people who are going to help you create the website, gives them clarity, and it just makes the process a lot smoother. So if people were interested in reaching out to you or wanted to know more, where would they go?
So you can go to our website. It's called thewebsitebuilders.com.au. Or if you want to find me on any of the socials, Nick Abregu, Abregu. Or you can just ask Trudy. Looking forward to seeing this podcast. And I hope everyone got a bit of value from it. Just make sure you own your assets, because even though it's a digital platform, you don't know when you're going to make $1 million a day. You don't know when that's going to happen. But if it does, or when it does, you want to make sure that you own it and no one else has control of it. So just make sure that's the most important thing that you keep in mind when building a website. Fantastic.
Thanks, Nick.
No worries. Thank you so much, Trudy.
Yeah. So everyone, that was Nick Abregu from thewebsitebuilders.com.au. Go and check it out. And especially if you are interested in getting a new website built soon, just think about what we've talked about today. Do that thinking for yourself. And then whether you work with Nick or whether you work with somebody else, definitely it'll be a helpful thing. Catch you on the next podcast.